Assalamu alaikum. My name is Bayan Abdul Bari, and I'm here with a guest. His name is Dr. Mujib Mannan. I was introduced to Mujib somewhere in the late 1970s as we made the transition from the Nation of Islam into the leadership of Imam Warith D. Mohammed. Over the years, I've heard many stories from Mujib, and I felt it would be good to share this with many people. So, first and foremost, Mujib, give us a little background on yourself in terms of your family history, where you grew up, where you went to school, so on and so forth, leading into you coming into the Nation of Islam, I believe, in 1969, and then the transition into under Imam Muhammad.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
It's a great pleasure to be on this show and in your company and to share, with the permission of Allah, some part of my life, and hopefully it'll be helpful in understanding the growth of a community among African Americans, especially. I'm an African American, and I became Muslim. And coming to Islam led me to understand the nature of humanity, history, and the world, and what our role was in life. My father was from Jamaica, West Indies. My mother was from Savannah, Georgia. They met in New York. In about 1945, they got married. My father was a janitor and assistant super in an all-white neighborhood with millionaires on 90th Street between Park Avenue and Madison Avenue. We lived in the basement. I grew up. I have two siblings. I was the first African American to go to a public school called Public School 6, the William Blake School on 82nd and Madison Avenue. And being the first black person there, they tried to get us out, and take us to court or to some type of proceeding, because they didn't believe I could have lived in that neighborhood. I was subject of abuse, discrimination, being invisible in class for a period of like almost the entire 6 years that I was there. But my father was a person who, and my mother both had a lot of pride, and they said that you are equal to anyone, and God gave you a purpose. And my mother said God gave me a purpose to teach, to be a teacher. So that sort of stood with me. But I was interested in understanding the world that I was in, and I had a thirst for all subjects. I loved to read. I loved to study. So my first introduction to being interested in a wide range of things was when my mother bought a pair of some encyclopedias, World Book encyclopedias, and I read every book. And it was like 28 volumes. Not every page, but I read every book, most of it. And I said to my mom, I think I got all the knowledge in the world. She said, not quite. She said, well, Mom, it's a World Book encyclopedia. All the knowledge in the world is in that book. And, but, I didn't understand until later. My hero at that time was a man named King Solomon. I didn't know who he was, but he was very wise. He had chosen wisdom. I wanted to be like him. And then I went to a Catholic school called St. Ignatius Loyola on 84th between Park and Madison. I was the only black person there. There was one guy from Cuba that was there. He was another minority. And I became an altar boy at the age of about 11 or 12 at St. Thomas More Church on 90th Street, on 89th Street. And there were a lot of celebrities there. The Kennedys came there and other prominent Catholics. And of course, again, I was the only black person who was an altar boy in that church. Then I went to Cardinal Hayes High School. They paid for my tuition. And I endeavored in that competition to get a perfect score and everything. I always try to get a perfect score. And that time I had every grade above 90. I got an 88 in 88 in physics, and my parents were upset. Why? What am I doing with the 88? That's I was trying to be number one in the class. I ended up being number 7. I got a scholarship to Columbia. I had no idea of my identity in terms of being a black person. Just saw myself as a person. But the idea of being a Catholic priest sort of dissipated when I graduated from high school, and I started talking to Jehovah's Witnesses, and they started knocking on my door, and we were debating. I met their minister and tried to debate with their minister. They brought the minister to my house, and that led me to leave the Catholic Church and to start searching. I became a Jehovah's Witness for maybe 6 months to 8 months. I went to Columbia University. I was with Jehovah's Witnesses, knocking on doors and selling watchtowers and awakes. And then I met Brother Richard 25X. At the same time, I was taking Black history, Afro-American history. And once I saw what they had done to my people, what had been done to my people, I was so upset. I was just beside myself. So I started changing my name to what I thought was a more fitting name. I walked away from a name was Barsheba, which was meant in Hebrew something about a well, being a person who digs a well, seeking knowledge. And I was an English major. I wanted to do a minor in philosophy, but when I studied history, I became a minor in history. And history became my greatest love. I was also, as I was growing up when I was 12 years old, I took music. And I became a clarinet player at high school and a clarinet player at Columbia University in the marching band at halftime games. And I loved music as well. And as an English major, I loved poetry and writing. When I was 16 years old, I published my first play, which was produced by the city of New York, a program called Summer in the City, and the children were involved in that. And it was performed in Central Park. So I was good in English, I was good in music, I was good in history, I was good in philosophy, and I tried to be good in everything that I did. But those are the things that I loved: philosophy, English, history, and also had a love of religion. So I sort of walked away from Jehovah's Witnesses the same way I walked away from the Catholic Church, because they couldn't answer certain questions that I had posed to them, like the doctrine of transubstantiation, how the body of Christ became into the bread that was in communion. So while I was in Columbia, I dabbled with Buddhism and chanting. And I read Richard 25X, who talked about Black history and the Nation of Islam. And I sort of liked what he said. And I eventually became disenchanted with Buddhism because they wanted me to bow to the statue of Buddha, and I couldn't do that. I just couldn't, something I couldn't do. I liked the chanting and all that stuff, and the middle path, the Eightfold Path. So now what happened next is that I met a brother named Milton 3X. Well, he wasn't 3X at the time, but he was talking about Islam. And he had a mentor named William X. Galt, who was a musician. And I went to William X. Galt's house on 132nd and Lenox Avenue over a funeral home. And that day that I went to his house, I heard him play John Coltrane, A Love Supreme. And I heard A Love Supreme, I felt it in my soul. I said, what made that man play like that? He said, it's Allah, Allah Supreme. I said, whatever that is that he was playing, it's calling me to be to that. It's calling me. So if you want to find a love supreme, you just go to the mosque. You go to Temple number 7. You'll hear what Coltrane heard, and then you go from there. So I went to...
Now, they were in the Bronx at that point because the building had been firebombed after Malcolm's death.
That's
and
correct.
they had moved uptown. I found this out years later because when I came in, it was already the Bronx Temple and they were already back downtown. But they were on Prospect Avenue. I remember you telling me on 161st Street, for those who know the South Bronx, right by the number 2 and 5 train, that train line.
That's
And you
correct.
told me that The Jehovah's Witness was in one part of the building because they were both renting spaces. Am I correct?
Yeah, both were renting space. The Jehovah's Witness was on the second floor, and the Muhammad Islam was on above them.
Ah, so
So when I went there, it was like going upstairs, basically, from Jehovah's Witnesses to, and I accepted. I'm the minister James 7X. I
uh-huh.
accepted, and when I accepted, they asked me to speak, to say something. I said, well, I used to be downstairs, but God has brought me upstairs, and it was upstairs in my thinking. I was trying to find that sound, that whatever it was that made Coltrane play like that. And that when I heard this sermon by James 7X, everything started falling into place for me. And Allah is God, Muhammad is his messenger. Of course, at that time it was Elijah Muhammad that was saying he was the messenger of God. And so this was 1969. In my second year at Columbia University, I made that change. I became a member of the Nation of Islam. I became John C17X, the 117th person named John to join. And eventually, I was knocking on the same doors, the same projects with the Muhammad Speaks that I had knocked on with the Watchtower. And some people took a double take. And my mother, especially, she said, "What are you today now? You're Buddhist one day, now you said you're Muslim." So I did radical things like take all the pork out of my mother's refrigerator and throw it in the garbage. And she said, "Boy, are you crazy? Why are you taking my food and throwing it in the garbage?" I was very, very radical, and it was a great awakening. I was disenchanted with one thing, and when I met Farrakhan, they introduced me to him as a student at Columbia who was majoring in English, and he was saying perhaps he could help us with our work and my speeches and things like that. I said yes, but I would also like to teach music in the school. And he told me, well, you might as well sell your horn because we're not into music. We're trying to build a nation, and we're playing too much music. So I went to the pawn shop, 103rd and Broadway, and I sold my saxophone. I cried a little bit, but I was willing to sacrifice for a greater cause to free my people from slavery of the mental plantation. That's how I thought it in my mind, and that was the level of my commitment. And I dropped out of Columbia University because Farrakhan had said, "You don't need the devil's education; you need Muhammad's education." And I just quit. In my second year, and at that time, and I began to be a person. I recruited a lot of students from Columbia to join Muhammad Temple Number 7. In fact, I brought at least 6 or 7 of them to, and 2 of them became members of the community.
Can I ask you to let the audience also know your first marriage?
Yes, in 1971, I joined a workshop of a very famous poet. He's even a lot more famous now. Her name was Sonia Sanchez. And she was a professor at BMCC at that time. And I was a student in her workshop. And she, was a great teacher. And we had great conversations. And she thought I was very advanced in poetry. And one of the students in the class said, well, why not make a book out of what we were producing in our class? She said, well, that costs money, and we don't have the money. And I said, well, Ms. Sanchez, I'll do the book. And we could raise the money. So that's how I met her. We became married the next year. She became Sonia 5X. She joined the Nation of Islam after me, and changed her name, became Sonia 5X.
In Temple Number 7, Mosque
Temple number 7 on 116th Street, 102 West 116th Street, where we are now as Masjid Malcolm Shabazz.
What year was this, Dr. Mujib, that Sonia joined the name?
I met Sonia in 1971, and we got married in 1972.
Mm-hmm.
And we, I became a director of public relations, working with a team of Leroy 23X and Wayne Grice, who were more advanced than me, but I was a great good writer. The press releases, I wrote the first Bean Pie commercial, and I became an assistant to Minister Farrakhan in writing his major speeches for events like Black Family Day, the WLIB weekly broadcast, Now, not that he needed anyone to write his speeches, but I wrote speeches. He used, my research and information, and he made it his own, in his own way. But I had to prepare speeches before he gave them, major speeches, do the research on different historical information, sociological information, political information, cultural information, etc. I played that role for about 4.5 years.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Some years ago, the person that introduced me to you, Malik, they knew him as Brother Jake in the Secretary's Apartment
Yes.
with Maceo Haziz. But I didn't know him until maybe 78 or 79 after the change.
Yeah.
He told me,
yeah.
Oh, you brought him in?
Yes.
Wow. So the thing is,
he had a sister named, he had a cousin named Corrine, and she became Corrine 5X, and she's related to him, and that's how he, I met him. And
that's how he came. Okay.
Yeah.
So I remember that when I met you, the change had already happened. We were a few years into that transition, and you were already in Chicago with Sonia.
Yes.
But I didn't know until recently, about a year or so ago, that Imam Muhammad, Rahimullah, had actually tapped into your skill set, to use that language. He found out that you had the writing skill and I guess some other stuff, and then you worked with him.
I did for 4.5 years too. I got a call from him, Sonia and I did, and he said, "Brother, I heard about your good work in New York. I want you to do for me what you did for Farrakhan. What you did for Farrakhan. I want you to be my researcher and the public relations for the community." He said, "We'll pay you way out. We'll make sure you have a place to stay, and we'll make sure you're comfortable. You can be the minister of public relations and research, and if your wife could be the minister of culture, then we would like to have you." And that's how we moved out. We moved out within 2 months of that call.
Now,
wow.
Now, Dr. Mujib, let's backtrack a little bit. Because I think this is very important. What you're sharing is very crucial, very vital story, and we appreciate you sharing this information with us. At this point in your life, you dropped out of Columbia. You were second year in Columbia, which is a prestigious university. You sold your sax. That means you sold your saxophone.
Yes, I did.
You made sacrifices to join Mr. Mohammed and the effort of the Nation of Islam during the time. You cried. You let us know that you cried when you sold your sax. Mm-hmm. Now, when Imam Muhammad transitioned the Nation of Islam post the passing on, well, first let me backtrack. Where were you when Elijah Muhammad passed? Were you in Chicago at the time?
No, I was in New York. I had gone back to Columbia actually and got my degree, and I was in New York.
I was going to ask that.
I went back. My wife had good sense, and she was 35. I was 21, and she said, "You better go back to school." And I went back to school. So, and I graduated in the class of 73. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I was working at the Public Relations Department, which is at 110 Lenox Avenue. There was the office across the street from the mosque. And I had a staff of 2 other people that were with me. And
was that Leroy Baylor and Wayne Grice?
No, they were in the Muhammad Speaks office at 102 West 116th Street. I was across the street at 110, down in the basement. But we worked together. I worked together. I was in that office with them for a while. And then Lieutenant Clarence moved into that office and had a desk, and he took my desk, and I took another office.
Let me stop you right there. For those who are listening and have a knowledge of the history, they will already know who you're talking about. But for those who don't know, particularly the younger people, Lieutenant Clarence 7X was the first lieutenant of the FOI out of Temple Number 7. and the surrounding boroughs. He
That's correct.
became he became Imam Hussein Shabazz under Imam Warith D Muhammad and was sent over to Newark.
Yes, yes. To Masjid Muhammad Nur Temple number 25. Yes, Imam Hussein.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's the connection. He was our first lieutenant back in the old Nation of Islam. He became an imam under Imam Muhammad and was sent over to Newark.
Mm.
The other thing you should know is that when I moved across the street from Wayne and Leroy, who was also in the populations and marketing area, I shared that office with Captain Yusuf Shah. He was my office mate, and so we were there. I was there with him until I left for Chicago, and became good friends with the Captain Yusuf Shah, who was the captain of the FOI. Every day, we were in the same office.
The East Coast regional captain. That's it.
Yes.
Yeah, wow. So now continue. I just wanted to mention
So
that because
when I moved to Chicago, I noticed two things right away. The people in Chicago who were in Temple Number 2 hated everyone from New York. They didn't like us because we were from New York. Eventually, I brought a crew with me from New York to help me set up the public relations office. I brought Brother Van, who was a person who was I trained to be involved in writing press releases and news stories. He was very good at that. Baki Rashid, who was a promoter for the Miss Black America beauty pageant and other Afrocentric events throughout the United States, and also John Omar, who was a fine artist, a commercial artist, and he knew Sonia from BMCC because he was down there as a professor also. So I brought that team in, and immediately I saw that in Chicago there was a split between people in the ministry and people in the FOI who were former members of the FOI. But I met Imam W. Muhammad, and I had an opportunity to learn so much from him about Islam directly, and more than I'd ever known about, and also to study other religions and to find similarities between Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, etc. I did research on that. I did research on history of Genesis. Some of his speeches, I did a lot of research and stuff like that. The idea of race, the origins of race, I did a lot of research on that. I wrote a book about that when I was in Chicago in 1979. I wrote a book called Cultural Imperialism and the Birth of the White God. And I did a series in the paper called The Origins of the Caucasian Christ. And, he said to me, the research you're doing is good. I want you to share it with my ministers. But, I did, but, the best I could. But I ran into a lot of challenges doing public relations because we had enemies within that were people from Chicago. The people that did not like Farrakhan, who had not liked Malcolm, did not like us, to some extent.
I want to stop right there. For those who are listening, the same people that hated Malcolm hated Farrakhan.
Yes, the same people.
The same people, I think they said Malcolm warned him of that. So it was the same exact people
Yes,
on the national staff.
the national staff. I was frustrated as to why the Imam didn't get rid of them because I was young. I was 25 years old. So why don't you get rid of these guys? You can see that they're undermining him. But then I got to understand later on that you just can't pull people out of positions in a national organization without having a replacement. But being young, and impatient, that was my pet peeve with how things were going in Chicago. But eventually, people left on their own because they were in it for the money, and there was no money there.
Yeah, Dr. Mujib, let's stop right there. Let's stop the tape right there. Because this is another critical juncture that we're getting to, right? The transition from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam ran by him, the considered to be the patriarch of the movement, right?
Yeah.
Financially, all of these different things, and the transition, when the transition occurred, when Imam Muhammad was agreed and voted on to become the next leader of the community, February 26th of 1975. Where what was your mind? Where was your mind at that portion of time, considering the passing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and now this dawn of a new of a new era, basically, for lack of a better expression, this new movement or the transition of the movement from what it was to what it became. Like, what was your mindset at that time, seeing that as unfold right in front of your eyes?
Well, I was troubled and relieved at the same time. Uh, the reason why I had left other religions I was in because there were questions that I had that could not be answered. So this idea of God being in person, I justified that by saying, well, God could be whatever he wants to be. He wants to become in a person. He could come in a person. Um, and but the idea of him being ever present, omniscient, hearing prayers, if he came in person, he only has two ears. How could he hear the prayers that were being sent to him? That was a problem. Um, Another problem was that I found contradictions in the lessons that we were learning. The questions, the contradictions that I could figure out this was the wrong answer. And the answer that was given when I asked that question was, well, it says at the bottom of the lesson that Elijah Muhammad was giving the answers to the questions by Farad, and that the answers were nearly correct. So that was a loophole. And there was a mathematical problem on the blackboard that was shown. Well, Farad was doing some arithmetic on the blackboard, and the wrong answer was there. So if he was God, how could God make a mistake in a mathematical problem? So these in the back of my mind. And so I was troubled by that. When Imam Wallace Muhammad said, man means mind, the universe, in the sense that the universe is mental, that was a relief for me because in my prior studies of the ancient mysteries, they always talked about the universe being mental, and everything was once an idea, and that what you're seeing with your physical five senses are manifestations of ideas. So if you look at history as a clash between not armies and the kings, but a clash between ideas, then you would understand the nature of humanity. So when Wallace Muhammad would start speaking with that type of language, man means mind, words make people, and things along that end, then it was the next step. It was a natural progression because my mind was bursting at the seams of trying to hold on to rationality when a lot of the answers that were given in the English lessons, that they call it English lesson C1, the Book of Supreme Wisdom, if you looked at it and said, well, this is the wrong answer. How could it be supreme wisdom? And Imam W. Muhammad gave me a chance to look at his library and see the things that he had been reading. And I visited his house. I could borrow his books and things like that. It enlightened me and lightened my heart and made me look at the world as a bigger place than race and the machinations of history as they're taught in schools. You talk about battles and crusades and conquest and emperors and kings, and we have to look at ideas interacting with each other and how they came out.
Now, Dr. Mujib, let me ask you a question too, a reference to, again, sticking within the first 5 years of the transition from 1975 to 1980. Because these are crucial years. The first 5 years were crucial years. Your friends, and I'm sure maybe you could speak to this. Your friends, the brothers and sisters that you knew in the Nation of Islam under Mr. Muhammad, and then the transition to Imam Muhammad. How did you feel if you knew any friends of yours who didn't make the transition, for lack of a better expression, meaning that they went and when Minister Farrakhan branched off, they left with him. First of all, did you have friends that did that? And how did that feel when you saw people that you might have known branched off into reliving the Nation of Islam through Minister Farrakhan?
Okay, that wasn't a problem for me because when I moved in 1975, 2 months after Elijah Muhammad died. I ran into a whole new group of people in Chicago. I wasn't in contact with too many people in New York, except that when I came to visit in my capacity as working for Imam W. D. Muhammad, and my close inner circle, everybody in that circle made the transition. I've heard about other people who didn't make it, but they weren't close to me. Everybody that I know that was close to made that transition with me, and I didn't have that problem. But I did have a problem with Farrakhan. He came out as the national spokesman for Imam W. D. Muhammad, and for a while he was towing the line. He was saying the right things. He was making the transition. It seemed to be that way. All of a sudden, he changed and decided to go back and try to reinstate the Nation of Islam. Now, I've always wondered to what extent that was a genuine thing, because he was so much into the new teachings, as we call them. And for him to go back, I didn't understand it, but I thought it might have been personal, because he was so badly treated in Chicago by the Chicago staff, being sent places where he was not welcomed and enthusiastically and things like that. But I was worried about the split, and I was hoping there would be no bloodshed, but there was no bloodshed. I think Imam W. Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan were able to handle that very well, his leaving. And as a result of that, the two communities have a very good relationship.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's it.
Yes. No, thank you, Dr. Mujib, for that context, because I think that's important for a lot of people to understand that the evolution of the movement and the intricacies of the movement, because the movement was very intricate. You had a lot of moving pieces. You mentioned there was no bloodshed. That's Allah's doing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing that. There wasn't no bloodshed because internally there could have very well been bloodshed. That's what I'm saying, from a lot of different parties, but Allah made it so that He protected this community through that tumultuous internal period, to make it out of that period. And, people went their ways, and that could have been a blessing too, that people did go their way, because sometimes people have to progress, and have to, grow on their own, if you would, to then come into realization later of maybe they saw things a little bit differently and then come into reality later. My next question for you, so, as you go into the stages of the community, it's growth after the 5, and then we get to the 10-year mark, the 10-year anniversary of the community's progression, from the Nation of Islam. Where were you during this period of time, during the first 10, and what kind of roles did you play in the progression period after, for the first 10 years? What were your roles? Did you have any roles at that point? And what were some of your experiences, in that regard?
Well, I sort of moved away in 1981, 1980. I came back to New York. I had established a business called the Mannan Institute of Marketing Research, and my biggest client was the Amsterdam News at the time, and I became circulation manager of that newspaper. It's a black newspaper, the largest one. And I decided to go for a doctorate at Columbia University. So I re-enrolled at Columbia University in 1980. So between the Amsterdam News and Columbia University, I took a lot of my time, and I only went to the community for Juma to help the Imam. He had some issues or something that needed to be written or researched. I wasn't there on a daily basis. I didn't have my employment was at the Amsterdam News, and a lot of my time spent in studying history. I ended up getting a master's in American history in 1982, and I decided to go to law school about the same time at NYU. So my plate was full. My plate was full, and then I got married again in the middle of all of this, and I got divorced Sonia, and I got married again. And I began to visit other masjids, including at Columbia University. You know, we had Juma there, and other masjids just to find out what they were like. So there's a period of moving away from spending a lot of my time with the community, spending a lot of time with my studies and with my work.
Mujib,
Yes.
I think there was a period that you were based in the Virgin Islands, right?
Yes. After I graduated from law school, well, actually, while I was in law school, I went to the Virgin Islands in 1983 on a law student civil rights fellowship to work for the summer.
Oh.
When I graduated in 1984 from NYU Law School, I signed a contract with the district attorney's office in Brooklyn to work there in 1985. And I went down to the Virgin Islands to work full-time with Legal Services of the Virgin Islands. And I became a lawyer there and practicing lawyer, helping poor people with issues, including fighting the Seafarers Union, which had owned former slave plantations and had people living there and without bathrooms and many bad conditions. So that was one of my major cases down there.
You were based in St. Croix?
I was living in St. Croix, yes. I moved there. So I moved there. And then I moved back to New York to fulfill my contract with the district attorney's office. And from there, I established an office in Brooklyn, and I did a lot of criminal cases, immigration cases, a couple of civil rights cases, and I practiced until around 1998. I got a job as a professor at the College of New Rochelle in New York, and I was also a professor at the University of Virgin Islands. I went down there also, and I loved it.
Yeah,
I was very, very busy. I was very, very busy.
Man, Dr. Mannan, you were a very busy academic. Very busy academic. Did you know Dr. Naeem Akbar?
Yes, I did. Naeem Akbar. He was a prominent part of the transition for Imam W. Muhammad for our community. Prominent. He was right there next to Farrakhan in terms of prominence. And he was friends. We were friends, and he was, he knew my wife, and he knew me. His book on Black psychology and the psychology of the Black child is very prominent stuff. He was I believe, at Morehouse at the time. After he left the community, he went to teach at Morehouse.
Correct. You were out teaching at Morehouse as well?
No. I know he was at Morehouse. I was in the College of New Rochelle.
Okay.
We did correspond for a minute, We did. We stayed in touch. I had a chance to meet when I was in Chicago, and afterwards to meet a lot of prominent Afro-American writers, Mary Baraka, Gwendolyn Brooks, Hansi Mahabudi, all those, Dr. Ben. These were the circles that we were in at that time.
I want to just step back a little bit because our host, Bilal Hassan, has done a documentary on the Muhammad Speaks. And there was, as I've come to learn over the years, the people who are writing for the Muhammad Speaks, the editor, they were not members of the Nation of Islam, but Mr. Muhammad was wise enough to hire them for the newspaper, and it made the newspaper accessible to a lot of other people. As a teenager who came into the Nation of Islam and who was in an Upward Bound program, one of my close friends in Upward Bound, and we became roommates in my last summer. He was involved with the Panther Party, and I was involved with the Nation, and he was very critical about the Nation. But then there were things he liked about the Nation. And one day he said to me, he said, but that Muhammad Speaks newspaper, that's very good news. And that's because they had, people who, what was his name, Joe Walker?
Yeah, Joe Walker.
He was the editor, but he wasn't a member of the Nation, but he edited the news.
He was a communist. He was a communist. He was the Communist Party.
He was a communist. Oh, yeah. Okay.
He's a member of the Communist Party.
Oh, okay. So that's a little interesting tidbit in terms of, making the paper accessible to not just people of the movement, but, I remember seeing the coverage from the, what was it? Remember the Black Political Conference in Gary, Indiana?
Yes.
All of that was being covered in the Muhammad Speaks back then. So it appealed to a number of people who got into the paper. They may have went past Mr. Muhammad's section, which was the middle part of the paper, but they would read the news. And this brother was, we would go back and forth when we were in our room during the summer at the Upward Bound. And but he had respect for the journalism. So, I just want to add that in because you were part of that. And also stepping back, because I like the way you're progressing, which my brother is doing with you. But Black Family Day, I was told by Malik that it was a combination of you, Leroy, and Wayne Grice.
Wayne Grice, the three of us, yes.
That you all came up with the concept and told the minister, this is what you need to do. This is the topic.
Yeah.
And so I'm asking you now, I could have asked you in private and I kept forgetting. Is that correct? Did Malik tell me the correct information?
That's true. The three of us were involved in bringing the idea to Minister Farrakhan and the promotions. And so we divided up the work. And I had a strategic plan of getting 70,000 people there. And the plan was basically everybody write down their family, friends, acquaintances and associates, everybody you could think of, and you call those people and you ask those people to come and to bring 5 more people. And
that's your marketing skill, I guess.
That's the marketing, yes. This is a subject that I love. I love marketing. And Wayne and Leroy did the commercials that were on radio. WLIB, WBLS.
That's correct. That's correct.
All that.
And you all came up with the Live from Muhammad's Temple?
Yes.
For those who don't know, was it 72? Was it the fall of 72?
Fall of 72, after the incident of April, yeah.
Yes. And after being on the program that a lot of us youth as well as elders used to watch, Ellis Hazlitt's Soul program. The minister was on there for a full, what is it, 90 minutes or an hour or something like that?
Yeah,
that was the first time he was. That was the first time he was seen nationally like that, before Arsenio Hall. So the thing is that amount of people, and I remember the Muhammad Speaks, and Bilal, go search the archives. It was front page news in the Muhammad Speaks. But this was the working coming out of number 7 and the surrounding temples of number 7. So that was but the fact that Malik told me years later that was the brainchild that you three came up with. The other thing I want to add for the listeners, I mentioned Wayne Grice. He was the Wayne 3X Grice. Wayne was actually an actor, and you know his background better than I, but he was involved in the actor studio, and he was the co-star of an NBC series with Burt Reynolds that was filmed in New York. And I didn't know about this until I came to the Nation. I knew about the series when I was younger, But I found out later that was Wayne 3X Rice, who was in the Nation. And so just to fill that in, but
Yeah, he was in a television episode with Bruce Lee too.
oh, he was with the
Kid,
Green
oh
Hornet.
kid, yeah, yeah, he was on. Yeah, he's on there too.
Wow.
That's what he.
And
That's what he said. Yeah.
that was a big series, Bilal, when we were children. I was in seventh grade and seventh, yeah, I think seventh or eighth grade when that came on. And
Like
we
the Green
watched that
Hornet.
every week. Yeah,
The
it
Green
was a TV show. You can go on YouTube and find episodes,
hmm
or it might be streaming on one of the platforms that offer free streaming. Because I did
hmm
see it come up on my screen. That's why I'm saying that. I was tempted to watch, but I said, nah, I'll catch it another time. But that was a big series. So Wayne was on there. I also found out that Wayne was in the actor studio, which anybody that knows about theater and how
hmm
the head of the actor studio was teaching, it was popular after World
Was
War
this?
II or maybe before World War II, the Stanislavski method coming out of Russia.
hmm
But a
hmm
lot of people came out of the actor studio, Paul Newman, uh, uh, um, Marlon Brandau, Marilyn Monroe, and there's other actors who I can't think of right now. They came out of that. You had to be accepted into the actor studio. Wayne Grice was in the actor studio. So
When okay, not, I want to ask Brother Beyond Dr. Mujib in reference to not making it about Brother Wayne Grice, but is Wayne Grice. But that's interesting that you mentioned the cultural contributions. Was all this with Brother Wayne, happening when he was in the nation or after the transition
Well, I
when
know
he
him
joined the act?
working in the nation now. I don't remember much of what he did after the transition. I'm not sure he even made it.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to what extent he made it.
mm,
When
hmm
did he die?
hmm
He died
in the
fairly.
90s, I heard about it because Malik told me that when the brothers got together, they were talking and but the way I heard that he had passed away, I won't go into it right now. It's not a bad way. I heard it through like a fourth party. So, you know, I've been meaning, and I didn't mean to use this time to do it, to ask you to verify certain things. All right. But it's been in my head. I said, oh, I remember Mujib telling me this. I wonder if I'm correct in understanding that. So a couple of things you've already addressed that answered that. But I was just mentioning that because, and this is a little sidebar, you know, however you want to edit it or edit it out. We had people, Bilal, in the Nation of Islam that were involved in the music business. And so the Delphonics, two-thirds, there were three people in the Delphonics, three males. Two-thirds of the Delphonics, William and Wilbur Hart, were out of Temple Number 12 in Philadelphia. Um, have you ever heard of the five stair steps, Bilal?
No, but my mom and dad probably would have definitely would
Oh,
have known.
yes. They were before the Jackson Five, all right?
Okay.
And they came out of the Chicago Gary area.
Mm,
And they called them the five stair steps because they were literally a family, just like the Jackson Five. But this is
mm,
pre-Jackson Five, because if you one of their songs made it into the hip hop era, Ooh Ooh Child, because that was a big hit and it was used in movies. That came out in 1970. They recorded for Curtis Mayfield's label, if I'm not mistaken. But
mm.
the whole family, from what I remember, were in the Nation. The sister and all the brothers. And when they joined the Nation, then the sister wasn't singing on stage. And they sang at our bazaars. The Delphonics sang at our bazaars. Members of Kool and the Gang were in the Nation.
This is interesting. She said this, but beyond because I've seen some of those historical posters, online. They still exist. And I love the throwback posters because they're very simple but very dynamic, the
Mujib,
90s, 70s, 60s. But I wanted to ask because I came across one of the posts that Sonia Sanchez and some of those big performers like of the time, and this was I mean, this is huge, So I wanted to ask, the contributions to the Nation of Islam, part of it, we had our own culture, we weren't trying to compete with the white man or the wicked part of the society, the wicked part of the culture, that we created our own in-house businesses, our own in-house expressions, for lack of a better word, expressions, right? Um, and I know, Dr. Baji, you mentioned earlier in the interview that you, that you were asked to be the minister of public relations, and your wife, Sister Sonia Sanchez, your former wife, minister of of culture. And I wanted to dive into that a little bit more because, as the transition happened, and as we get to the today in 2026, and the aspect of culture, right? The artists have always told me, members of our community who are still present with us, you know, they make sacrifices to join the Nation of Islam. And they put away their artistry or put down their artistry, some of them, because they went to sell papers or they went just to progress the mission, right?
Yeah.
But now, post the transition, a lot of them say, I mean, the Delphonics that's multi, I mean, Delphonics is a major hit. I mean, those Cool and the Gang, those are brothers and sisters who, they made their monies, they made their fame, but there's some artists who didn't get that type of recognition, you know? They didn't have those type of accolades. They have the talent. They could have went mainstream. They could have went with the Delphonics and Diane Warwick and et cetera, et cetera. They could have went that route, but they chose to focus on the mission of the Nation of Islam. The business of culture is a big money-making machine. And I guess my question is, um, you know, how how can we like build a system around our artists today? Learning this history knowing this history is excellent. Is excellent. And Imam Muhammad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad wanted us to do for self. Okay, they wanted us to establish our own expressions, right? Our own unique expressions. And today, we still have progress to be made in this regard. We're not there yet. We haven't mastered the art of business when it comes to culture, when it comes to art. And I'm not just talking about singing and rapping. I'm just talking about the whole expression of art, because we have a lot of it. Dr. Majid, what is your take, if you have any, on like the significance of culture and having your own expression, specifically us as a community, you know, how do we, what is your take on this, on what I'm
Okay.
saying, what is your take?
First of all, culture defines mentality. Mentality is composed and made of words, as Muhammad said, Imam Muhammad said. Words are anything that brings to the mind an idea. So we're not talking about just literally words on a page. The environment that you live in becomes a word, and it impacts you and imprints you as to how you see your life. And these words impact the five senses. So if the environment is not created in a way that's wholesome and that brings out dignity and distinction and excellence, then the culture is warped and damaged and denigrated. So we have to present a culture that brings us dignity. It informs us about our excellence, informs us about our task as human beings on this earth, and informs us of our group identity. In other words, it seems that God put into place an environmental relationship between the mind and the environment, whereby if a man goes to the mountain, he will have a mountain culture. If he lives in the desert, he will have a desert culture. And if he lives in the jungle or the savannas, the culture of people come from the environment that they live in. Even same thing with animals. So we have to create a word environment that advances the dignity of us as human beings, that advances the excellence of us, and not bring us into the area of physical confinement of our thinking to materiality. And materiality is important, but you have to develop a wholesome culture. And then you have to understand how business is done. So you can market your culture, use your culture to advance your society, your city or your community or neighborhood, whatever it is. So slavery took away from us any words of culture that could advance our humanity. But our survival instincts, and by the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we were able to survive and produce a culture of hope, a culture of keeping hope alive, a culture of believing that we were not designed to be slaves, that we were not designed to be people who were denigrated or defined by the color of skin or our circumstances. So this condition of hope produced blues and jazz and many other things that we're talking about and referred to as being Black culture. But that's just the beginning of it. We have to expand it to a point where the messages in the music, the messages in the art, the messages in the words that we speak should advance our humanity to its highest point of excellence. It should optimize our souls to be aware of the beauty that Allah put into us and into the earth and into our environment, and also remind of our duty as human beings to establish a community that forbids what is wrong and advances what is right. And that's what culture is supposed to do. Help us build the community that enjoins what is right and forbids what is wrong. And when we do that, you have a culture that enlivens and makes strong our human existence as a community. What happened during slavery, we were given a culture of fear and rugged individualism. We always have people that we became wealthy or famous, and they could be Oprahs, they could be Bill Cosby's, but these are individuals, and this is a product of culture that destroys. You can't think of yourself as being part of a group, and don't see yourself as being part of a group, or being part of a whole. Then your whole society is being damaged and being denigrated. So I'll leave you with this idea of the African proverb, which stuck with me. And it came from West Africa. It said, banding together, the ants beat the elephant. And the person who told me this said, basically the strongest creature in the jungle or in the savannah or wherever you want to go on this earth, the strongest land creature is not the elephant, it's the ants. Because when the ants are united, millions of them, the elephant runs from them. He doesn't have a chance. So the idea of community cohesiveness and unity and loving for your brother what you love for yourself has to be part of our music, our art, our stories, and our culture.
Wow, that was really put well. And I want to add, I want to ask you a question. Do you think, because there was a period, which I was not aware of until many years later, the revival of the Black arts movement in the 60s. It began to affect the music and everything around us. And when people listen to Curtis Mayfield now, or they listen to James Brown say it loud, it was the result of people like your former wife, Sonia Sanchez, and other poets who took the culture of music and the spoken word and was transmitting a more positive, direction. And this fed down into the community, and this had an effect on the community. People who look back now say, wow, y'all was wearing the afros. There were people doing that in the earlier part. Cecily Tyson, I came to understand, was the first African-American actress to wear her hair naturally on a major TV series that was done in New York. It was called E.G. Marshall was what it was on CBS, and it came on in the early 60s. And I'm forgetting the name of the series right now. And it was said that she wore her hair naturally. Well, she was in touch with those movements that were going on in the 40s, or the 50s, I should say. And it was just an expression. But as it began to grow through the music, you began to feel it in the music, Bilal, in the pop culture. It was coming across. So we have an important job to do in terms of using laughter, using music, using drama in a way to convey, whether it's in animation or whatever, our
Agreed.
story,
Agreed.
our stories. And what has happened with some of us and the younger versions, and I'm not criticizing anybody, so I'm not going to mention names. There have been films done by young Muslims, and usually they'll start off with that, but then everybody wants to go mainstream. And one thing I learned from the dealing with the music business or having friends in the music business was you develop your audience first, then you cross over. Because if your career takes off in a crossover, you won't have that audience to back you up. And if you leave your audience who built your career, help your career, and you don't feed them and you lose them and you get caught up in the crossover stuff, that can be detrimental to the rest of your career. There are
Mm.
few people who did it and were able to survive, but they lost their core audience. So what had happened is the young filmmakers, um, they have done some interesting films, but then there's this desire to go immediately mainstream. And what happened is you don't build your audience. You got to build your audience. I'll use one example, and this is Jahiliya from The Ignorance. I'm going to say it that way. I don't watch his films like that, with the exception of some positive stuff he has done most recently that was on Netflix. But Tyler Perry, he developed his audience. He had a audience that went to those musicals and those plays, and at some point, he took it to the screen, and it was still those black church people that supported it. But as it continued to go, one of those films crossed over big, and that's what took him into the mainstream. And that's what's missing. But as I was listening to Mujib, I was thinking about Curtis Mayfield. I was thinking about songs. Uh, I mean, even when I mentioned the five stair steps, ooh, child, things are going to get better. They were encouragement for us as well as being entertaining. I just want to share that. You can edit that out if you want to, but I just want to share that.
Gentlemen, I have to be someplace at 5 o'clock, so I got about
Go
five
ahead.
more.
Go ahead.
No, alhamdulillah. We appreciate your time today. And one of the questions I have as we close is relating to the younger generation. You know, my peers and those who are behind me, Generation Z, et cetera, who are coming up. You know, what advice would you give young Muslims, particularly in the African American Muslim community, coming up? You know, what was some advice that you would give us coming up as as in fact, you know, incoming leaders to a community that is young, still relatively in comparison to, of course, civilizations that were thousands and thousands of years old, we turn 100 years in 5 years as a group, as a nation of Islam will turn 100 years, that the movement will turn 100 years in 5 years, right? We just celebrating that Muhammad would have been his 50th year last year in 2025, right? So all of these centennials and bicentennials and are happening now, right? By no mistake. But my question is, a community that's aging too, that a large percentage of the community members are seasoned members of the community, who are aging, and the leadership is also of aging demographic. You know, what advice would you give people in my age bracket, in their 30s, down to, I would say, college, undergrad, post grad, experience? What advice would you give?
Yes, the advice I would give is that always remember that it is better not to go into a venture alone as a Muslim. Go as a group. Grow with people in your family. If you buy a house, family members should buy the house together. If you can live on the same block and build a neighborhood, you should do that. because this idea of rugged individualism has killed many Muslim communities, and it set people against each other. We become tribes that will say we're Muslims fighting against another tribe who's also Muslim, because we don't see a common unity. As the Prophet said, none of us is Muslim unless we love for our brother what we love for ourselves. That's not just talking about the individual man. He's talking about the social man, the society. We need to have communication as Muslims in America with Muslims in Africa, Muslims in Indonesia. We need to see where we can unite and have a world community of Islam. And we already know that when you pray in congregation, the prayers are worth a lot more in congregation than they are on the individual level. That's a lesson that God is teaching us, that what God desired to bring about through all the revelation is a community of people that will respond to his call to obedience, not just the individuals. And so when you destroy the idea of doing things together and just trying to be a success by yourself, you could score 50 points in the game, but the team still loses. If the team wins, everybody wins. So we have to think of ourselves as a team of people, a group of people, a band of people, a family of people, and not just individuals. This is the downfall of the West. It's individualism, and it's a downfall of Muslims. The reason why after almost 800 years, the Grenada fell because the different Muslims who were really different, they were fighting each other. That's why Grenada fell. That's why Turkey fell.
Correct.
That's why the empires fell. Individualism, love for your brother what you love for yourself. God made the skin the biggest organ in the body, and that's what unites all the organs in the body. It keeps them from falling out. It's the skin. And the skin is a representative of the idea of the unity of humanity. And the skin is representative of love. And from the time that you're in the womb, the first sense that's developed among human beings is touch. Sight is the last one. Touch is the first one. And so the touch, every child needs the touch of his parents, needs a touch of community. So from the very time that you're born, the idea of community is there. The community has to touch you as a child, hold you and hug you and love you for you to develop as a thinking and sensitive human being. But if you don't get that touch, you'll become a monster. You could become a monster. So we have to be in touch with each other when we do business, in touch with each other culturally, in touch with each other in dealing with the problems where we live. And always try to unite. If there's a big deal, don't try to get the whole deal by yourself. Bring it to your brother and your sister. Let us do this deal together. Then all of us will rise. That's my advice.
Mujib, is there some way that we can get where people can get information about your books, your talks, and whatever? Is there a website or something like that?
I'm behind, so I don't have a website, but one is coming.
Okay.
But my stuff is on Amazon. Okay.
Okay.
Or my books.
All right.
On the John Satchmo Mannan.
And that's even including your earlier book, History of a Harlem Mosque, I think it was called.
No, that's coming out hopefully end of this year. It's coming out again. It'll be available, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, Dr. Mujib, I'm happy to hear that because we will definitely like to invite you back on
Inshallah.
To do an author spotlight of that book, and inshallah have a more discussion on that research because that's very important along with your other literature. But we definitely appreciate you the time out to be with us this afternoon and sharing your story, which is to be honest, a very amazing, extraordinary story, and inshallah it'll be an inspiration for those who listen later to this stream, to this recording, and to those who may not have heard your voice in a while.
Inshallah. Thank you, my brother.
I have some brothers. I'll send it to you. May know. I don't know if you know Imam Abdul Haq Mohammed from Woody Crest.
Oh yes. We saw each other recently. Yes.
Okay. Well, he was here on our platform. We interviewed him. A man Sheikh Khalid Amin, who was one of the couriers out of New York, one of the 1,000 Muhammad Speak salesmen, who lives in Medina now. Every time we go over there, our members of the community go over there, he can reach down. I'll send it to him as well. You may not. You may know him, but he may know you. So I want to send him this recording as well, inshallah. Brother
Thank
Bayan,
you,
who was
brother.
Yes,
Brother
sir.
Bayan, who was my
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank
host.
you.
I got to
Thank you.
run. All right, then.
Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum
Salam.
salam. Brother Bayan, any last
Yes, sir.
words to close out?
No, that was good. Alhamdulillah. Allah bless us. It flowed really nice. And it was off to a slow start, but it kept moving good. And again, you can edit and bring